Well, good day to you. It is, in fact, Monday, February the 8th. And I hope you're doing well. You hope you're staying safe. I hope there's joy in your life. In other words, I hope you're having a great day. Now, if you're not having a good day, that's fine. As the teacher says, everything in life is energy, and that energy has its opposites. So just because you're having a bad day today, who's to say tomorrow won't be the best day of your life? You just have to wait till tomorrow to find out, right? So don't give up yet. Now, it might not be tomorrow. It might be next week. It might be the best week of your life. Who knows, right? But it's coming. Now, if you've never listened to this channel before, I do want to welcome you. Let me introduce myself. My name is Gary Willing. If you've listened to this channel before, I want to thank you for coming back. Now, what we talk about here on this channel is a lot more important than who I am, for sure. What we talk about here is the emergence of the teacher, the one awaited by all the world's religions. And not only is the teacher coming back into the world to teach humanity and show us the way forward, but also he's coming with a very, very tiny group of his disciples, the Masters of Wisdom, who will be teaching humanity in the same way. Now, we talk about why are they here, what does it mean for humanity, and what are their priorities. Those are the most important things that we talk about here. But why is Maitreya returning now along with his group of masters? Well, we can look at it a couple different ways. One, we have lost our way to such a point where we are living almost totally separate lives, right? Countries live separate from one another. Individuals live separate from one another, and so forth. So there's no livingness on this planet in the way that we really should be living, which is as one family, brothers and sisters of the one God, right? But in reality, in a very real sense, there is no separation all throughout cosmos. So why does humanity think that we are separate, right? We live separate lives, right? That's why we have the divisions that we have in the world, right? The political, economic, social divisions, right? So they are here to teach us the truth that we are one. It's starting with Maitreya already being on TV now. You know, he's not speaking in those terms. He might be speaking very simply about politics or about, the stock market, maybe, I don't know. But he's speaking in a way to help eventually open up the hearts of those people who are hearing him to the fact that we are one, right? Now, the other reason why they're here, and this is just as important as showing us that we are one, is humanity needs structures. We need political structures. We need economic structures. We need social structures, healthcare structures, even the religious structures, right? To reinforce and support the truth that we are one. The structures that we have today do not do that. They support the few at the expense of the many, right? Like you look at the economic and the political arena, right? You have the ultra rich, hundreds of billions of dollars that they are in command of, right? And yet a significant portion of humanity is literally starving to death. So the structures don't support the truth that we are one. The political structures definitely don't support the fact that there's unity because there's such political divisions, right? But it's coming from the fact that humanity believes itself as an individual and nothing else, that there's no other truth to life other than the fact that there's the individual versus the world. It's like the world against you and me, you know what I'm saying? So we have to come to the understanding of the truth that we are one, and that's the reason why Maitreya is here. Now, his priority, and this is very, very important. If you take anything from this video or any of these videos, this is the most important thing. Maitreya says that humanity must create peace. Our very survival depends on this, if we do that, if we can do this. If we can't do this, then our survival is in jeopardy in a very real sense. Okay, so I'm not trying to be an alarmist, but I'm just trying to keep it real. Maitreya says without sharing, there could be no justice. Without justice, there could be no peace. Without peace, there could be no future. So we have to see that our future depends on whether we create peace. The first step, the principle of sharing. The general misunderstanding of this is people automatically think communism or socialism, and that's evil in their eyes, right? Well, the principle of sharing is not an ism, okay? It is when a country takes the excesses of what they have and gives it freely to another country. And those excesses could be food, it could be clothing, it could be building products, it could be lumber, it could be anything, right? In the case of Iraq, it could be oil or natural gas, or Venezuela might have excesses of natural gas that they can give, but they could give it freely to those countries that need it. And then from the master's point of view, every country, of course, has needs, but every country has an excess to give. Now, if you are in doubt of whether the principle of sharing does create peace, let's look at a historical fact. Okay, now 70 or so years ago, there was a man by the name of George C. Marshall. He was the Secretary of State of the United States under President Truman. He, along with others, saw that Western Europe, that was recently decimated by war in World War I and World War II, needed help in some way, shape, or form. Now, the genius of his plan was, he said, instead of just giving him money, let's take a look at giving excesses of that's just kind of sitting there doing nothing, and give it freely to Europe for them to use to rebuild their roads, their factories, their schools, their power plants, that kind of thing, right? Their houses, bridges. And they did. They shipped it over there. They let them use it. It did just that, but it also stabilized the economies of Europe. It stabilized the social unrest and the political unrest at that time. It created an economic boom in Europe, which then they had excesses that they gave back to the United States in payment for what they gave, which created an economic boom here in the United States not long after that. But this is the most important thing to really get from this. 70 or so years after the principle of sharing took place, for a very limited amount of time, the United States and those countries that shared in Western Europe have a more peaceful, goodwill, trusting relationships with those nations that share than any other nations on the planet. In fact, Germany since then has not attacked any other countries. France has not attacked any other countries. England has not tried to conquer parts of Europe. The United States hasn't bombed the crap out of Italy. And neither of those countries have come over here to try to take us over. So it created goodwill amongst those nations. Now, if you look at it, okay, so if what the teacher says is true, that without peace there could be no future. Okay, now let's take a look at that, because there's a couple things that we could look at from, a couple different angles we could look at this truth. Is, of course, the most commonsensical view of the need for peace is the fact that there are, 24 countries or so that have nuclear weapons. And if any one of those countries that had a nuclear weapon or were parked right next to another country that started there was a conflict in that country, well, then that might involve that country that has nuclear weapons, and it could eventually become a nuclear war, could destroy all life on the planet that way, right? Of course, that makes sense. Now, what you might not be thinking, because you might be somebody who's very concerned about the environment, who's been working, on and on to keep, to help solve the environment, maybe, marching for economic ecological justice, maybe even writing their politicians to help them see the need to solve the environmental problem, right? You might be one of those people that are like this, but what you might fail to realize is we need peace in order to solve the environmental problem, because the nations of the world have to start to trust one another first before we can actually tackle that problem in a unified way. So even if China decided to totally revamp the way that they operate their country, right, and they cut their greenhouse gas emissions to zero, but the United States, Russia, Africa, Europe didn't do anything with it, yeah, it might help a little bit, but it's not going to do enough good to really, solve the problem, right? Every country has to participate in this, but it takes trust, it takes goodwill amongst the nations in order to do this. And the reason why nations aren't doing it is because nations don't trust one another. So if the principle of sharing historically did create peace, and even though it was done for a very limited amount of time, it created peace 70 or so years after that fact. Imagine what the principle of sharing would do ongoingly all over the world. You know what I'm saying? And that's what Maitreya is advocating for the world. Okay? Now, I want to get into the video, so that's, but that's the main part of what we talk about, of course. And then, we also tie what, the priorities of Maitreya to the current events of the time, which seem rather hopeless. But also, this is another important part of this channel, okay, is there is so much hope out there. Don't listen to the news. Don't listen to those negative Nellies and those Debbie Downers on the news and those pundits that say that, all is lost, the world is going to hell in the handbasket. There is actually evidence of hope, and that evidence is the miracles that have been going on all around the world. And it's not only evidence that the teacher has returned, but it's evidence of hope. So that's the other thing we talk about here. Now, if you have any questions about what we talk about, you can always post that question as a comment. You can email me at searchforsigns@mail.com. If you want to do your own research on this, which I definitely recommend, of course, within the description of every video are so many links that you can go to these things called websites and get more information on this topic, okay? And you can kind of do your own research on it. So don't take my word for it, and certainly don't take the word for it from the people who post from time to time saying how much they hate what I say. You make up your own mind, right? And then do with it, proceed how, if you do believe in this on whatever level you believe it, it's important to do something about it, not just believe it. You're here. I'm here. Everyone listening to this is here for a reason. And we are here because we are the ones that are going to create a future for future generations. If we don't make the right decision as a group, all is lost on this planet. So each one of us are here because we are here. We have the experience through past lifetimes. We have the knowledge. We have the wisdom. We have the capability and the resources within ourselves to make the right decision. Maitreya is going to give us a choice. Either accept the principle of sharing and create justice and create peace and have a future, or not. So, but he says that he already knows the answer to that, his presentation of the choice, and the answer of humanity makes us glad. So the end is always known from the beginning. But you're here, I'm here, the other people listening to this are here because we have to do something about it, and we are the ones to do something about it. So don't wait for somebody else to do it. So, all right. Now, I do have a couple questions to cover in this video, and let's get on into it. Now, the first question comes from All Is Grace. May I ask why you don't just say who it is that is appearing on TV? Well, I do say who is appearing on TV. It's Maitreya. Now, he's not using the name Maitreya. Now, this is very important, All Is Grace, and anyone listening to this is vitally important, okay? The reason why I'm not saying who Maitreya is on TV, okay? One, and this isn't quite as important, but I don't think I've recognized him yet on TV. I know I haven't recognized him on TV yet. So I've seen him in my life, so I know there's truth to this. I know it sounds like a cop-out what I'm about to say, but it's not, okay? The reason why, even if I saw him on TV and I recognized him, or when I recognize him on TV, I'm not going to mention his by the name of which he's going by, is because, and this is what I want you to hear, is it is vitally important for every one of us to want for the world what Maitreya is advocating for the world. If I say that person on TV is Maitreya and he's on this channel and I've heard him at this, and if you go to this YouTube channel, you can see Maitreya who's already giving interviews and so forth. If I did that, you would start to listen to him based on the fact that I said that. And it would infringe on your free will, and you would miss the opportunity to recognize him and have a heartfelt response to what he's saying. So if you turn around and you recognize him on TV, let's say it's this week, next week, a month from now, whatever, and you turn around and you tell somebody else, you have robbed that person of the opportunity of the same thing, of recognizing Maitreya for themselves. But it's not important to recognize Maitreya right now. It's more important to want for the world what he's advocating for the world. Okay? So Maitreya, even though Maitreya is on TV, not claiming to be anybody but just an ordinary person, he must be speaking very simply that it's being missed by everybody. You know, he might not, like, I know somebody who I know of somebody who talked to somebody who said that they recognized him on TV already, okay? I know it sounds like, well, they said, he said, that kind of stuff. But I do think there's truth to this. And this person said that Maitreya does not look anything like the pictures that we have of Maitreya, and he's not even talking like what we think Maitreya would be talking like. So, don't look for him the way that, in the pictures of him, like he is in Nairobi, Kenya, with the beard and the headdress. He's not dressed like that. He doesn't look like that, apparently. He must look totally different, and he's speaking very simply, but in time, all is grace. And everyone listening to this, in time, everyone will recognize him. And in time, he will declare himself before the world, and then you'll know, right? And it will be presented in a very interesting way, because the way Maitreya will eventually declare himself is he will be asked by all the news media, which was, and they will only do this because we as a people will demand from them to give him the time to speak to us, okay? But he will come before the world on the day of declaration, the mics and the podium and all that kind of stuff, all the news media linked with him, speaking. And when he starts to speak, he will do it telepathically. We will hear his call to humanity, him declaring himself as Maitreya. We will hear it, for, however long he speaks, telepathically in our own head, in our own language. So if you're French, you're going to hear what he's saying in French. If you are Italian, you'll hear it in Italian. If you're English, you'll hear it in English, and so forth and so forth and so forth. So there will be no misunderstanding. We will actually see the need for peace from Maitreya's perspective, not just him telling us. He'll give us a vision of what life will be like if we do accept the principle of sharing. He'll also probably give us a vision of life on earth if we don't, from his perspective. It'll open up our hearts in a way that have never been opened up before, right? We will see on that day, in a very real sense, that we are one, and that we should start living like that, right? Now, the other thing is that Maitreya said himself that his love will go out in such potency all around the world, it will be as if he embraces every one of us, even physically. We'll feel it physically. And then there will be millions of spontaneous cures all around the world. And as Benjamin Creme always said in every one of his lectures, and in that way, and only that way, you will know that that person, only that person, is the one awaited by all the world's religions, and not really up until then. So if I told you, I would be lying, because I haven't recognized him yet. But if I did tell you after I recognized him, I would be robbing you of that. So that's the reason why. I know it sounds like a cop-out, all His grace. I get it, right? And if I was in your shoes, I'd be like, yeah, I've heard this one before from other people that have talked about different things, and they promise this and they hype this up and it never happens. And I'm not trying to hype anybody up, okay? But it's vitally important that you want for the world what he is advocating for the world, and you do something about it, not because it's Maitreya who's saying it to you, but because you want it too, right? I am only doing these videos not because of the experiences I had with Maitreya, or even I'm only doing these videos because I want a future for not only myself, I want it for my daughter and her children, if she ever has children, but of course for all your children and your children's children as well. I want life to continue on this planet. And I do think, and I do believe what Maitreya is saying is true. We need peace above anything else. So that's the reason why I'm not, like I said, I'm not trying to hype it up. I'm not trying to bait and switch. I'm not trying to do anything like that. I have complete faith that you and everybody else that listen to this channel will recognize Maitreya at some point on TV. It will happen at some point. And I also think there's a very strong likelihood that you and other people who have heard this information have already seen Maitreya on TV, just haven't recognized him yet. So, and when you do recognize him as Maitreya, you go, oh, I saw him on such and such a channel, or this person, or that, they were being interviewed by that journalist or whatever like that, and, back in the day, or back a few years back or whatever. And he won't be a stranger. I'll put it like that. So, and like I said, I could have already seen him on TV and just not picked up on it too. Who knows? Anyway, I've had my suspicions about a few, but I don't think that I've been right. So anyway, but in time, I think we'll all come to the realization of who that is. Now, but thank you very much. I do appreciate the question, because it gave us a chance to kind of learn more about it. Now, and hopefully it gave us all a chance those people who have listened to this video, it hopefully will take to heart the fact that we shouldn't be talking about if that person's Maitreya if we see him on TV. Hopefully that's the most important thing about that. So I really appreciate it, you giving me the opportunity to talk about that. So, all right, now the next question comes from Luke Williams. Luke, I am your father. No, actually, that's the most misquoted line from Star Wars, by the way. I'm sorry to digress, but it's Luke, I'm your father. But didn't he say, Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father? I am your father. That's what it was. So sorry about that, Luke. I misquoted Star Wars. The question you asked was, Benjamin Creme in an interview said his training from Maitreya in 1972, 18 years after he was told by Maitreya that he would be here in 20 years. Can we assume he was born to the earth around 1974? Luke, that is not correct. Okay, now let me explain, okay? I see where you're coming from, but that's not true. From what I remember Benjamin Creme said, in the 50s, he was walking down the street one afternoon, and this guy came up to him that he had never seen before and said, I have a message for you. There's a master who's been trying to send you messages, and they've been bouncing off you. And Benjamin Creme denied it and said, no, there's no way I could ever be. Because Benjamin Creme said he knew about the master, so they weren't, it wasn't a foreign idea, right? But he didn't think he was advanced or evolved enough to work with the masters telepathically in that way. And the guy said, no, I can guarantee you that, or I don't know what he said exactly, but he said something like, I can tell you for certainty that he is trying to send you messages and they're bouncing off you. If you do this or that or whatever it was, and Benjamin Creme was never allowed to say what it was, then the message could get through. So he said whatever it was, it must have worked, because he was getting out of the shower one night and he heard a voice in his head that was louder than his own, the thought in your head. He heard a different voice, and it was quite loud. And it said to go to such and such a bridge on such and such an evening at such and such a time, of which Ben did. And he said it was kind of quiet at that evening. He said most of the time during the business hours, that bridge is quite busy, but at night it's kind of quiet. And there was only him at one end of the bridge and this dark colored vehicle on the other end of the bridge. And when he walked up to the car, he saw people sitting in the car, and one of the persons in the car was the guy that said that he had been receiving messages. And it started from there. And then his master started to train him and so forth. And at some point, not long after the starting of his training, his master, who was giving him telepathic messages, and Benjamin was recording it into a tape recorder, his master said, turn the tape recorder off. The master of all the masters has something he wants to say to you. And Ben got on his knees, and then he saw as a vision, which was very real, in a very real sense, Maitreya, as he is. And Maitreya came and asked Ben, first he did a couple things. One, he opened up Ben's mind to where Ben could actually see life as the masters see life without time. He could see events that happened long into the past, things that were going on now, and things that would happen in the future, but he saw it all happening as one thing. Then Maitreya said, you have a role to, he's saying this to Ben, you have a role to play in my coming if you so choose. And Ben, of course, accepted. And then the vision lasted for a few minutes, and Ben felt all the love of humanity and so forth. So there was other parts of the experience too that led it to believe that it was real. And then it faded, and then his master came back and he started talking. And then it didn't, and Maitreya did say that he would come back in about 20 years or so from then. And he said in the event it was actually, I guess, 18 years or 17 years, something like that. I can't remember. It's like what you said. Now, what happened is, in the 70s, okay, Maitreya knew that he would have to come out at some point. And eventually, I think it was hoped that it would be around 1950 or so that he would come out. But his coming had been put off and put off and put off and put off until Maitreya says, I can't wait any longer, I got to come back. So in the mid-70s, 5 masters preceded Maitreya coming into London. The first master entered New York and has been living in New York ever since the mid-70s. One went into London, separate from Maitreya, So it was a different master. And then one went into Geneva, Darjeeling, and Tokyo. So those 5 were the ones that started the whole process. And then, so after eons of these masters living in near total isolation, totally away from the public eye, and when I mean isolation, I mean it from our point of view, okay? They don't live in isolation. They live life, no matter where they are, in total unity. But from our point of view, it would appear like they were living in isolation. But they were living away from the public eye, I guess is a better way of saying it. And after eons, they entered modern cities, okay, and have been living on the outskirts of those cities ever since. And then after those 5, there was 2 more that entered 2 different cities. One went into Rome, one went into Moscow. The one into Rome is the Master Jesus. And then a couple years after that, Maitreya, who had been living 17,500 feet up for eons, left his ancient retreat, went down into the plains of Pakistan, and then got on a plane and flew to London. Now, he didn't have to fly. He only flew in order to fulfill the man-made prophecy of the Christ returning to the world from the clouds. He could have thought himself there in an instant, but he did it in order to fulfill that prophecy. And it was a man-made prophecy. It wasn't a prophecy that was given by divine providence or by these masters to whoever wrote it in the Bible, but it was something that they just came up with. And so he did it in order to fulfill that prophecy. So now the masters themselves, now the other part of your question about him being born, the masters, are basically born in 3 different ways. Okay. Let's take Sai Baba. If you know Satya Sai Baba, who recently passed away, and I'm putting passed away in quotation marks. You don't see me doing it, but I'm doing it, okay? Because he is out of incarnation, but he's still on this planet, living and working and doing what he was doing, but he's just not in incarnation at this time. But he was born from a mother, lived the life of a young boy, became an adolescent, young man, adult, middle-aged man, old elderly man, and then died. He did that because he was a master. In fact, actually, Sai Baba is higher evolved than even Maitreya, and he could have lived in the same body, very youthful-looking body for eons if he wanted to. But he chose to live like that as a form of service because he was living. He kind of came out not known as a master, but he came out in the public eye. So it kind of freaked people out if he was hundreds of years old and yet looked like he was 30, right? Now, other masters, most of the masters, when they become a master, they are then reborn to a mother, and then after about year 4, they realize they remember being a master, and then they live their life as a master. And then they don't age after a certain point. They might get to be 30 or 20. They might look like they're in their 20s or their early 30s, but they're hundreds of years old. But they don't, coexist with humanity yet. They're still, even though some of them are living in modern cities, we don't know them as masters. They're just living amongst us kind of deal. But for eons, they lived as masters away from the public eye. But they were born from a mother, but they might be hundreds of years old. They might be 1,000 years old. They might be it just depends, right? Now, Maitreya he created his own body called a Mahavarupa. It's a thought form that he created this body with. Now, his body has never been done before. It's quite unique, okay, in a couple of different ways. One, he took, don't ask me how he did it. You'll have to ask him when you see him. But he took all the qualities of the Buddha and his own qualities and synthesized it together and created this body. And this body is sensitive enough to withstand the higher vibrations of the Christ, but it's also strong enough and dense enough to live at our low level. So it can do both. But he created the body with thought. He wasn't born with a mother in the modern way. He had been living for eons totally away from public eye, totally away from any convenience stores or blockbuster videos. I mean, totally away from everything, right? 17,500 feet up in the Himalayas. But right before he came into the world, he created this Mahavarupa for himself, and that's the body that he's in. But if you see him, in person and were able to touch his hand, he is just as physical as anybody that you would ever shake their hand. You know what I mean? But it's created by the mind of this master. So hopefully that helps. Now, I've gotten a little long-winded in this video, and I typically don't like to do it, so we're going to cut it there. So anyway, if you have any other questions, feel free to post them, and I'll try my best to answer them in the future. You take care. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.